Hello everyone, and welcome to the 6th chapter of the top 10 ways to draw the head. In this chapter we're going to talk about the freestyle method. The freestyling is a completely different approach to drawing the head. It's different that it's not a certain formula or structure, but more of a technique. It's used to draw anything, not just the head. Still life, figures, anything you can see in front of you or live from a photo, you can draw using this technique and get very good results in return. It's like the theory of everything, but for drawing. Once you master this method, you can basically draw anything you want. This method consists of a couple of techniques combined together and used depending on the situation. The techniques are angles and containment, the macro angles to micro angles, negative space, measurements, vertical and horizontal alignment, curves, triangulation, and segmentation unit. I will explain each technique in the structure section. This may be the best method for beginners to acquire the accuracy to get between 80 and 100% likeness of the subject they want to draw. Remember, accuracy comes first, style comes later. There is no structure to this method, as I mentioned in the introduction. It's mainly a group of techniques used to correctly copy the object you're drawing. So here are the top 10 techniques in the freestyling method. These techniques can be used both as a measurement tool to check your drawing and as a drawing tool by itself. We will start with the first one, the angles and containment, the macro angles to micro angles. This technique consists of two steps. A. Macro angles. Macro angles are used as an instrument to draw an object with broad, straight strokes, to make it easier to contain the object in a simple shape, thus reducing the chances of drawing subject bigger or smaller than they are. It's used to draw the big picture by observing the subject as a whole, carefully drawing the broad angles of the subject and not getting bogged down by the smaller details. When you do it correctly, you will end up with a correct shape that contains your subject in correct dimensions. B. The micro angles. Once you're done with the big shape of your subject and you don't have to worry about the dimension, micro angles are the next step, where you break down the long macro strokes into smaller, more accurate strokes by drawing the smaller angles of the subject. Although you will have to observe the smaller details while you're doing the micro angles, you don't have to follow the little curves of the subject 100%. Just break down the long strokes into couples of smaller ones at this step. When you are done with it, smoothing it out would be the final step, and it will be an easy one since you already have the correct base to build on. Technique number 2 is the negative space. Negative space drawing helps you break your logical brain connection on the subject. This might sound weird at first, but as a beginner, your worst enemy is your logical brain. Your brain will tell you how your subject should look like instead of what it actually is. So without knowing, you will start drawing things that are not there. The obvious example for beginners is drawing the eyes high up in the head and much bigger than they should. That's because when we talk to the people for the first time, we focus on the eyes, so we think that they are the most important in the face. By seeing the negative space around the subject, it will help us draw the shape, which is basically nothing, instead of the positive shape, which is the subject. Your brain will leave you alone when you draw unknown objects, since it can't make sense of it. So by utilizing this method, you are focusing on the negative space around your subject and drawing its edges, which will be automatically the edges of the positive subject you want to draw. Also, this method can be used to check out your proportions. For example, on the right, it can give you the right space between the jaw and the shoulder, so you can be sure you don't draw it higher or lower than it should be. Same for the back of the head, or even the space between the nose and the eye further away. Make use of the negative space technique as much as you can. It can be a lifesaver in certain situations. Number 3. Measurements. Measurements are the most essential tool for any artist out there interested in realism. It's the most iconic as well. Googling a photo of an artist, you will find tons of pictures of artists holding a pencil at arm length, measuring the object further away. Now you may not have this luxury in digital painting, so most of these measurements you see on the right have to be done mentally, or by doing small strokes on top of the reference and on top of your drawing. The essence of this technique is the horizontal lines and vertical lines. It's not limited to them, by the way. You can of course add the angles as well as tangents and other geometrical shapes, but sticking with vertical and horizontal lines will get you where you want to go. For example, if you want to know where the edge of the eye is in comparison to the nose, all you have to do is to draw a line mentally or on the paper from the eye corner vertically and meet it with the horizontal line of the nose corner. Or maybe you want to know where the hand touches the neck. By drawing a vertical line from the left eye corner, you will find out that the hand touches the neck exactly underneath the eye corner. By doing all these measurements correctly, you will never do any large mistake, like having the left eye above the right eye, or the nose wider than it should, because the vertical and horizontal line will lock each feature, plane, bone, muscles, even hair, in its correct place. Starting with one eye or part of the nose or the ear, you can get the rest of the head measurements by comparing the rest of the face to that eye or ear, in a vertical and horizontal lines. This technique needs a lot of practice, but if you want to draw anything, not just the head, correctly, this technique is a must. Fourth technique is curves. Curves are similar to the angles techniques, but it can be used both externally as a contour or internally as features. It can be used for drawing specific location like the neck, the hair strands, or the eyebrows, or it can be used for checking your work like measurements. For example, I can use it to draw the spine in one quick gesture, or can check where the ear actually is by doing the curve of the neck, then drawing the ear with a curve. The beginning of the curve and the ending of the curve can be a measurement tool by itself. Just make sure you draw the same curvature on your drawing as you see it on the reference. Making the curve longer, shorter, higher or lower will change the proportion of your subject. As you will see later, I found out my curve of the ear was flatter than it should. I found out by using another measurement we're gonna talk about later. This is a good example to show that even if you messed up by using one technique, your other techniques will help you correct that mistake. That's why it's good to learn all of these techniques and use them in the right time at the right place. 5. Triangulation is an interesting concept that can be used in two different ways. The first one is about simplifying a complicated shape that you want to draw into 3 points or a triangle. So instead of drawing the eye and nose, you simply draw the shape that contains them. Once you copy the exact angle and side of the triangle, it will prevent any misjudgment on the proportion of the eye and nose that are in the triangle. So it's used here as a measurement tool. The second option is about finding a point on your subject in comparison of two other points. For example, if you want to find a correct place to draw the bottom of the ear, I can choose the point of the neck interacting with the chin and the point of the neck interacting with the dress, and draw lines to find the point of the ear. Copying that triangle simply gives me the correct place for the ear. As you can see here, when I move the triangle to my drawing, I realized the ear is a bit further away than it should. So I use triangulation as both measurement and a drawing tool at the same time. A lot of artists frown upon tracing for beginners, but if you want to try these techniques by tracing first, go for it. Just remember that the end goal is doing all these techniques mentally. The final one is segmentation. The final technique in the freestyling method is segmentation. If you watch the Jack Ham method, you will remember that he used the eye as a measurement unit for the face. The same concept can be used here, but not just taking the eye by itself. It's taking any zone or area or space that you can use as a measurement for other areas that you want to draw. For example, the space between the brow and the nose can be used to check the space between the nose and the chin, or the nose and the hair. This way you won't draw the chin too low or high, or the hair too high. Or you can measure the eye and find that it should be the same space as the mouth in this view. Or that the eyes are in the middle of the head, so what's above the eye should be equal to what's below the eye, and so on. The segmentation technique is mainly to check your drawing after you applied all the previous techniques. It's the last safety measurement to make sure your drawing is locked in perfectly and drawn correctly in the right proportions. The pros and cons of the freestyling method. The pros: if you master this method, you will get the likeness of the object you are drawing up to 80 to 100%. From all the methods, this one gave me the closest likeness to the original photo. This method has 6 fail safety features that will make sure you don't mess up at any point of the process. No formula, no steps, no rules, just a few guidelines and you are good to go. It's perfect for beginners. As for the cons, it can only be used to draw what you see, so it's unusable for imaginative drawing or concept art. The limitation mentioned above renders this method to be mostly for beginners. Once you become a pro artist, you will copy less and create more. Be aware that your drawings may become rigid using this method. Angles and measurement will give you correct proportion, but they won't give you fluid and dynamic paintings if you don't know how to smooth things up. So let's start the front, side and 3/4 views. Before we start, applying the techniques of the freestyle comes in 3 flavors. Using the techniques to go from big contour to small details, starting from one point of the drawing continuously toward the rest of the drawing, using both methods simultaneously to finish the drawing. I will cover all these 3 options in the next demonstration. Starting the first option by observing the outline of the face using long macro angles to get the basic shape of the head, then using the short micro angles to draw the inner details. Every stroke I make here is put down by measurements, calculating mentally where everything is compared to the other. As well as using segmentation unit to make sure the eyes are the same and the nose is one eye in between. Also using curves to place the nose and the jawlines. Once you have all the basic blueprint down, detailing now rely heavily on measurements. If you start with the eye, make sure everything around it is measured compared to it. You can also use the negative space to draw the area between the eyes and the brows. Negative space isn't only for outer spaces, but it can also be used internally. As you can see, I'm not staying in one place in the drawing. I'm detailing the eyes simultaneously, which is going to be different in the next option. Keep going around your drawing, detailing each part based on the other. Make sure every point you put down has a reference. Don't let your brain tell you where it should be. Observe and know for sure where every point is. As I mentioned before, this method surprised me by producing the closest likeness I got to the original photo, more than all the other methods. Basically because I'm copying exactly what I see line for line. Still on option 1, I used the same rules here, starting with the large contour of the face using macro angles and measurements, then going into details with micro angles and measurements. I drew the ponytail by drawing the negative space between the ponytail and the head. With option 2, I start from one point of the drawing and use this area as a reference for the rest of the drawing. This option needs careful observation skills, because you are drawing through thin air, no guidelines whatsoever. Once you are done with the first area, check and double check your drawing, because everything else will depend on this one single area. You might not see the underground work happening at this point, but every point I'm making right here is done by measurements, angles, curves, negative space, triangulation, and segmentation at the same time. My eyes are observing the reference photo every second, so my mind don't fill in the gaps by guessing where things should be instead of where things are. This option will take more time than the rest, but if done correctly, it's the closest you're gonna get to your reference photo from all the other methods and options. Take your time and enjoy the process. This might be daunting at first, but with practice, this method will be the equivalent of meditation to you. Even though your first instinct is to think that without the formula of the face, this can't produce good results, it will surprise you how close to the reference this will get you. I can't say that enough. Now let's draw the portrait. For the portrait, I will combine the two options I demonstrated together as a third option, using 3-point and measurements. Here I start with the major contour using the macro angles and inner contours using the micro angles. Then for the detailing portion, I use the 3-point to detail one eye and go from there to the rest of the drawing. Of course, measurements, curves, segmentation, and triangulation all are used in conjunction with the angles techniques to get the best accurate results. Remember to take your time and not to hurry this process, especially the first area you want to use as a reference. Make sure you are drawing what you see. You might think it's common sense, but as a beginner, it's a very common mistake to draw what you think you see, not what's actually there. So double check your work. Use small measurements inside the details to help you map it right. This is by far the closest likeness I got to the original drawing as well. Just remember, it's used to copy, not to create. I believe art has two levels. When you first start, you copy. And once you master it, you go to the next level and create words that only you can create. But as a start, this method will give you a great confidence boost. As in, yes, you can draw anything. And the freestyling method is now done, and here is the final practice sheet. Coming up, the Western anime, the comics. As for now, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.